So John talked a little bit about John Smale's commitment to ensuring that P&G maintained the trust of the public. Early in your work, you discovered a really compelling speech he gave on that topic, and you say that he was 30 or 40 years ahead of his time. How did that change how you approached the book?
Right. So this speech that you're talking about was one of the first documents that Kathy and John shared with me, and I don't think that was by accident, John. So yes, in the speech, Smale was describing what today we might refer to as stakeholder capitalism, kind of this idea that a company has obligations that extend beyond delivering a return to its shareholders, that it can't deliver a return to its shareholders at the expense of treating its employees badly, or at the expense of polluting the environment, or at the expense of exploiting the communities where they do business. And it's important to understand he was giving this speech in the 1970s. He delivered it a couple of years after Milton Friedman wrote his seminal essay basically describing the be-all, end-all of corporations as shareholder value. So I remember checking the date and kind of doing that. I was just thrown the first time I read it by the fact that he was saying that at the time he was saying it. Like that summer, the Corporate Roundtable would come out with a statement essentially repudiating the shareholder value model of capitalism. And I think, as I said in the book, Smale had him by 42 years. But that wasn't the only element of the speech that I found compelling. Just for context, he was talking about a slate of regulations that the Carter administration was about to apply to various different businesses. Some would affect P&G, some wouldn't. And clearly Smale was not in favor of more regulations on business. So, as a business reporter, I've lost track of the number of speeches I've heard from corporate executives complaining about government regulation. I mean, it's just standard. But until I picked up that speech, I don't think I'd ever seen one where the executive was arguing that corporations were overregulated and it was their own fault. And so I had to sit with that for a minute. His argument was that, and to get to what you were just talking about, John, this is 40-odd years ago, but his point was that businesses in general had lost the trust of the public. And he pointed out in the speech that a lot of the regulations that were being proposed were they were proactive. They were not reactive to something that businesses were doing. They were proactive because of what people were afraid businesses might do. That's the level of mistrust that existed. And the argument he made was really complex. His point was not that businesses ought to, as P&G people like to say, do the right thing because it was moral, because it was the correct thing to do, and that was it. It was more nuanced than that. His starting point was that businesses function best when they're regulated the least, and that the only way to lighten the regulatory burden on a business is for businesses in general to establish enough trust with the public that they don't feel like this proactive, preemptive regulation is necessary. And that struck me as pretty remarkable. It's not something I had read or heard articulated before. So that was another element of that speech that I found really, really compelling.